Welcome to Storytime, brought to you by the OWSCyCon2019, the online book event of the year. Consciousness returned with the sound of dripping, the cool of water, and the stench of rotting seaweed. He lifted his head and opened his eyes, and finished with a splash. A sturdy rope encircled his waist, tying him to the bars of a cage, just head and shoulders above the water's surface. Thin ropes bound his wrists in front of him. The cove itself was small, illuminated only by the sunlight streaming through an opening in the rock far behind him. He let his head sag as his mind spun. The voyage hadn't been particularly long, nor the route treacherous. The storm was unexpected, but they might have survived that. The moment he ducked down to the galley for a snack and discovered a woman hiding down in the hold, everything went wrong. She begged him not to say anything, but in his honesty, he quietly informed a deckhand he trusted to address the matter discreetly when they arrived at port. Or so he assumed. He pressed his lips at the memory. The captain was not the capable man he trusted, but an undisclosed drunkard. Thoroughly inebriated, he demanded that the crew adhere to the practice of casting women overboard. The poor soul didn't stand a chance, what with all the men eager to get their hands on her. Nothing he said could dissuade them, not that he could say much, being violently seasick as he was. They chained the woman and tossed her into the sea, and then he seized his recollection as something brushed his leg. He vaguely wondered what sort of captor would tie him up to his shoulders in water, while making sure he could neither swim away nor sink and drown. Why would someone choose this particular method? He was still staring at the water, trying to ascertain its depth, when the shadows grew a pair of eyes staring back at him. A burble and a splash made him flinch, as a small barrel bobbed to the surface. Tiny waves shoved the barrel towards him, and with his bound hands he scrabbled at the loose edge of its lid. Inside he saw a whole stack of tack, the round, tough bread sailors subsisted on most of the time. The seal of the barrel had done its job, and kept the tack dry, even under water. Carefully he slid a biscuit out and began munching on it, doing his almighty best to keep it above water. All the while the bulging eyes stared at him. There was something vaguely inhuman about the way his captor hovered up to her chin in the water, not to mention the colour of her face, a deep blue-grey that could not have been skin. Small slits in the middle of her face flexed. The creature had no nose. He jerked, sending the barrel bobbing away to the other side of the narrow cage. "What are you?" he demanded. She stared for a minute longer and disappeared under the water. A while later, a narrow-necked jug of water surfaced with a splash, but the creature herself did not return. Time passed slowly. Sometimes the creature would visit, sometimes she would send barrels or jugs of food and water into the cage. Some of it he even recognized as cargo from the same ship that once carried him. This treatment baffled him. Why would she care about his survival when she didn't even care enough to interact with him? The next time she stayed to stare at him, he asked again, "What are you?" She dove immediately, causing him to wonder if she didn't understand him. Suddenly he felt her body sliding up along his as she surfaced directly in front of him, her long tail pushed against his feet. The bulbous eyes and undulating gills were just inches from his face as she flourished a wicked-looking bone knife. Bringing the blade down toward the space between them, she made a quick lunge, and he instinctively brought his hands up in a protective gesture. His wrists came apart and his arms relaxed. She had cut his bonds. He looked up again, but she swam away without making eye contact again. He began to notice a pattern in her visits. When she brought food, she would stay to watch him eat until he had finished. He found he could delay her departure if he ate slower. After several meals, he stopped in the midst of a bowl of berries and watched her in much the same way she had been watching him. She noticed him staring, and turned to swim further away. "No, wait!" he cried. She stopped and faced him again. He pointed to himself. "Kellen," he said. "My name is Kellen, if you wanted to know." She glided forward, but not too close. Her mouth opened slightly. Kellen glanced around as the cavern reverberated with a beautiful sound, a haunting melody that sparked his memory. He listened as the song conjured the image of him climbing the rigging and trimming the sails like a sailor. The creature stopped singing and regarded him once more. Understanding washed over him like a cool wave. The creature before him was a siren. He watched her stare at him with an expectant gaze. Perhaps the song was her way of communicating. She sang again, and he immediately pictured himself in the garb of a deckhand. Was she asking whether he was a sailor? Kellen shook his head. "No," he said. "I'm not a sailor. I was only a passenger on the ship. My father owns it." He wondered if she could actually understand him. The siren seemed to comprehend as she wavered back and forth. She sang another song, and Kellen recalled the way he dove after Hans, the deckhand who had attempted to ensure the safety of his employer's son, when the storm seemed intent on knocking everyone overboard. He recalled the moment in which the siren sang, when, just as Kellen thought to thank the fates for sparing him from a deadly demise, Hans suddenly turned to the water and dove over the side of the dinghy. "Oh, that?" Kellen waved his hand as the siren watched him. "To be honest, I dove in to save him because part of me thought I was to blame. Perhaps it was my fault for insisting on accompanying the cargo ship rather than booking passage on a separate passenger ship." She seemed to accept his answer, so Kellen, after a few moments of hesitation, dared to venture a query of his own. He pointed to the cage and the ropes, keeping him from dropping into the water. "Why am I bound? Surely by now I have proven that I am no threat to you." The siren bobbed her head and sang another song, this one more ominous and vicious than the others. Kellen experienced another memory, but this one seemed more like a vision, since the experiences belonged to her, not him. He saw under the water varied shapes too human to be fish, too fish-like to be considered human. They sang, he saw, and the bodies fell from the surface. But merely drowning was not enough. He saw sirens lunging for the struggling humans, wrapping their long tails around them and pulling on their limbs till the men died. "I see," he said soberly. "So the fact that you closed me in this cage was more for my safety, to prevent my discovery, than for your protection." The siren blinked, satisfied that he understood. Kellen, however, had one more question. "If you're just going to keep me alive in this cage till doomsday," he wondered, "then why save me at all?" The siren twisted in a tight, angry loop and disappeared altogether before Kellen could call after her. This story time was read by Timothy Bateson and brought to you in conjunction with the OWSCyCon 2019. OWSCyCon runs from May 17th through May 19th. You can find us at OWSCyCon.OurRightSide.com. Again, OWSCyCon.OurRightSide.com. We have events happening across all genres. If you are a reader, you cannot afford to miss this event. You never know. You may just find your next best read.